Hey, it's Keith from Outlaw Speed Shop. You ever see a six-wheel Mustang? So I wanted to do something a little different from the norm when it comes to a newer vehicle, and I don't do a lot of newer vehicles, or newer castings anyways. So I had an idea about taking a Mustang and making a six-wheeler. Well, let me go back a little bit. I wanted to put a rear engine in a Mustang, and once I had the motor placed, I decided at that point it needed to be longer, which meant it pretty much turned into a six-wheeler, which in the end worked out really well. You know, I kind of knew what I wanted to do initially, and it just kind of went from there and actually got better. So I also wanted to be careful because I wanted to keep the original paint. So I cut off the back. I picked a spot that I thought looked kind of cool. I wanted to be past the rear quarter windows, and once I did that, I had to decide where I wanted to cut the interior so it didn't interfere. I made a couple cuts, and then when you're doing stuff like this, don't be afraid to cut short and then trim. So here you can kind of see I went not quite short enough, but it's always easier to cut more than obviously to cut less. So I pretty much cut the entire back seat out, which worked out fine. That's really theoretically would have been better anyways. And you don't have to use a Dremel tool. I happen to have one that I use consistently, and I'm pretty decent at using it, and I haven't cut off any fingers yet. Operative word being yet. It's coming, and if I do, I promise I will show it as a reminder of what not to do. Obviously, if you're going to use a Dremel tool, be careful with your hands and wear eye protection. I suppose I should follow my own advice. So I wanted it sitting lower, and in order to sit it lower, I had to raise the wheels, which mean it hit the top of the wheel wells. So once again, I got out my grinder and carefully tried to grind out the wheel wells to be just big enough to fit the wheels in. And again, do the same thing, little bits at a time until it's comfortable and it rolls. The rear window needs to be cut as well. And the Dremel tool, once again, was my tool of choice. Again, you can use a pretty much anything you have. You could actually probably use snips on that. Coping saw or jeweler's saw, anything like that works. So here you can kind of see where my head is at. And I want to make a roll cage, so I'm actually using calipers for a change, and a piece of brass tubing, which is my axle tubing. It's 1/16 the inside. I don't know what the inside diameter is, to be honest with you. 0.37 or some shit like that. Here I'm just getting my bends right, and then I'll trim it down so that it fits inside. This is pretty easy. I ended up just drilling 2 holes in the back of the interior for it to sit in and making a cross piece. Overall, very, very simple to do. You can make it out of styrene too. I did have some styrene, but I find sometimes that the brass works better. It doesn't kink as bad as the plastic or styrene will do. And also with brass, if you wanted to, you could stick something inside of it to prevent it from kinking. A piece of axle tubing or anything like that works. So I went through my pile, and I had a motor. I honestly have had it in there for a couple of years, not sure where it came from. But because I wanted the motor sitting with the technically backwards, but I wanted the scoop facing forward, so I cut off the scoop and flipped it around, so that way it would look, well, I'd say it looked normal, but nothing about this build is normal, so you be the judge on that. Overall, this part of it was pretty simple. The engine ended up having to sit, I had to make a platform for it to sit on. Obviously, I wasn't going to leave the axles showing and all that stuff, and I needed a flat surface to mount it on. Then I took my pin vise and drilled 2 little holes in the grill, one on the top and then one on the bottom, and I ended up using that as a pilot bit, and then I just went in with my regular drill bit just to make it a little bit bigger, and I ended up sticking a piece of Cat 5 wire in those as, just something that looks kind of cool. Cat 5 wire is great. It's the right size, and each piece you get has, most of them are 8 conductor, so you can pull out a piece. It'll last you forever. Everybody's got spare wire kicking around the house somewhere, and Cat 5 seems to be about the best for me, but I'm sure there's others. I think it's, if I had to take a guess, I'd say 24 gauge. So it's nice and small. And I just wrap it around my pliers to get the right bend that I want, or at least enough to get going, trim it down, put it in, and it's got a nice look to it. I kind of thought it was kind of cool. Hindsight, I might have should have done one on the other side as well. I have a big thing about symmetry. Wow. Then I'm taking some sculpting wire, and I'm going to make some exhaust. You can see one already down by the glue bottle, and I'm just cutting 4 equal length pieces, and I will twist the ends together, put a ferrule over the end, and that pretty much does it. It gives me the look I'm looking for, because I wanted like boat headers sticking out, because I thought it was going to look a lot cooler. Here I am looking at making it 6 wheels. You can already see how I have it laid out. So in order to do that, I have to extend the frame a little bit. I'm just using some styrene to do that with. Nothing fancy, but trying to keep everything level so that the wheels all sit the same. It took a little bit of work, but not much. Overall, pretty simple. Ended up making axle tubes. Everything fit perfectly. Nice and clean, and it worked out good because, like I said, I had to make a platform for the motor to sit on, so that ended up being what I ended up doing for that, and using scraps of styrene that I have kicking around. I never throw anything away. I have a bag of scrap styrene. I'm sure most of you do that do any kind of customizing whatsoever. Unless the piece is like minuscule, I'll always try to save it and reuse it, and I always seem to find a use. Maybe a year or two, but I ended up finding a use. Here I'm just making a radiator out of a piece of corrugated styrene, and I thought that looked kind of cool. I was able to sit it right in the back there, and you can see down below I made like tail lights. I made 4 tail lights on the back, because that's I didn't have room for 6. Mustangs usually have 3 on each side. Just didn't quite have the room that I was looking for. But here I'm kind of raising the radiator up just a tad, so I put it on a piece of styrene again. I know it seems like a lot of styrene, but there really isn't. But here you can kind of see what I'm going after. Everything's pretty decent. I was going to make some quarter windows because I was not bright enough to think ahead and cut those out of the actual glass. The big thing here is, again, if you remember, I said I wanted to keep the paint, but I wanted it to have a worn look. So I'm using various grits of Scotch-Brite pads just to scuff up, get some of the decals off. Then I'm using my lighter to darken up the exhaust a little bit, which is a cool trick. And just, real quick, light, faint type things. And otherwise it'll burn a little too much. So, and I've got various I got my chrome pens I'm going to use for the headlights. Projects like this I really enjoy because you don't have to follow any kind of guideline. There's no perceived understanding of what a 6-wheel Mustang should look like. So you can kind of do what you want and have fun with it without like, oh crap, I screwed up, or it doesn't matter. You can, as Bob Ross says, everything's a happy accident. You can make make anything work. And those types of projects are just really fun because, like I said, you have no preconceived, notion of what it's supposed to look like. And in the end, you're the artist and you can kind of do whatever you want. That's the whole point of builds like this, because I enjoy more so just hacking things up and trying to make them fit together. And I wouldn't go so far as to say kit bashing, because that's not essentially what it is. But these types of builds are just fun because you can do what you want. There are no rules. And to me, those types of builds are more relaxing than trying to make a pristine anything. It's just not fun for me. I don't mind doing it, but I just don't find it as fun as trying to make something out of the ordinary. It could be a hit or miss. You guys could look at this and think it looks like crap, but a lot of times that would bother me if I was building a very exact replica type of car, and it would be obvious if it wasn't right or there was something messed up. These types of builds, there is no right or wrong, so it's all within each individual's perception of what they think is cool or not cool. So to me, I think it's cool. I love the way it came out in the end. Here I'm using some weathering powders just to make things look a little dirtier, like it's been through the ringer a couple times. And I don't use these powders very often, but they are a handy tool to have in your arsenal, because there are times that they do come in handy. I could probably use them a lot more than I do, but I don't do a ton of those types of builds. So here is everything in pieces. This is what we started with. Plain Jane Mustang. This is what I ended up with. Again, I like it. I think it came out cool. I like the idea of it and how it turned out. I'm glad I kept the original paint, and then scuffed it up. Overall, there's things wrong with it, but I just think it looks cool. And that, to me, that's the biggest thing, is making something that looks kind of cool. And hopefully in the process of doing that, it sparks you guys to try something different. You'll until you experience the pure joy of just totally cutting up a car, you got to try it at least once, and hopefully this gives you some ideas. So I do appreciate you guys watching. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Once again, thanks, and I'll catch you on the next one.